Welcome to Real Life Church. We're so glad you're here today. And to be honest, I'm so excited that we're kind of splitting this up into 10-minute segments, but I kind of feel like that opening band when you go to a music festival and you got two big headliners coming behind you. You know, you got like the Foo Fighters and U2 coming out, and they're trying to get an opening act, and they're like, who sings that song, Who Let the Dogs Out? Let's get that guy in here. So that's kind of what I feel like I am today, but I'm going to sing the hit I got. We're going to get through this. And I want to start with a sound of applause. How many love roller coasters in here? Yeah, all right, a lot of roller coaster enthusiasts. Second one, even a bigger question by a sound of applause. How many love cats? Ooh, a lot less. You can know everything you want to know about a group by those two questions right there. And the reason I want to know about the cats is I want to know who is going to email me later today, because as I tell a couple stories, because when I was a kid from 6 years old to 10 years old, me and my friend Warren, who lived around the block, anytime we saw something awesome, we wanted to recreate it right then and right there. And I can remember one of the first times I ever spent the night at a friend's house. It was his house, and we went to see the movie in the late 70s called Cat from Outer Space. And it was about a cat who had a glowing collar. Not much of a great movie. It could talk. We thought that was cool. But when we got home, we thought, let's send his cat to outer space. So we grab his cat. This is a true story. We grab his cat and put it in a shoebox, tie it shut. It starts screaming because it's excited about going to space. And we take these toilet paper rolls and we attach it to the bottom. We then go to the garage to get the gasoline. We bring the gasoline out and we douse the toilet paper rolls for the ignition. We go to get the matches before you call PETA right now. It's a happy ending. I see everybody's face. But his mom, or I call her Houston, saw that there was a problem going on. So she stops, aborts the launch, the cat's let go. We tell the cat there was weather problems. The cat's disappointed. But its life was spared because we wanted to recreate a cat going to space. We fast forward another year, and we see a commercial for a roller coaster in Cincinnati called The Beast. And in the late 70s, this was the tallest, fastest, longest wooden roller coaster in the world. And we're looking at it, and we think that looks awesome, but we can recreate this in my backyard. So we look for wood, which we can't find wood. So we go to neighbors' houses, and we collect newspapers. And we build a newspaper roller coaster out of Scotch tape and newspaper that would go about 10 to 15 foot up into a tree, and was Scotch taped to a branch and came down. So it's a big newspaper slide. And then we had to decide who's going to go down this newspaper roller coaster. And I decided I would be the first one. So I get up on the branch. I'm sitting there. You know, I think I threw my Sour Patch Kids away over to my friend and said, I'm going to do this. And I'm looking at, please hold, please hold. And I go off the branch. I go straight through the newspaper. My dad is mad. My friends take off. I've bruised my tailbone. They take me to the hospital. And they have to answer the question now, how did your son get hurt? And my dad looks at him and goes, because he's an idiot. And he makes things like this. And there would be several more trips to the hospital over the years because my friend and I could not wait to try to replicate something we thought was awesome. And I think we do that with our life, where we know in our heart that God has a great plan for our life and we want a real life, an authentic life, a meaningful life, and a fulfilling life. But then we go off on our own at times and say, I think I want to try to build it myself. And it just ends up leaving us hurt and confused. In fact, God even kind of puts it this way when he says, there's a way that seems right to us, but in the end just leads to pain and to death. In fact, there was a king who had so much, he had everything. His name was King David. And he said this phrase that I love. He said, unless it is the Lord who builds the house, the builder's work is pointless. And I think we could easily substitute for the house the words our lives. Unless it is the Lord who builds our lives, the builder's work is pointless. As we talk about faith and these giants of faith, the one question every single one of them had to answer that we have to answer is, who is going to build our life? Who's going to be the one in control of our life? Who's going to be the one that we trust in? And when we think about Moses' parents, I love just a few lines that we get from them show that they trusted God with their life, that God was building their life. Because we read when he talks about them, that it was by this faith, their trust that God was building their life, that they hid Moses for 3 months when he was born. They saw that God had given them an unusual child, and they were not afraid to disobey the king's command. See, at the time, God's people were growing prosperous in Egypt. And the new leadership, the new Pharaoh, did not like that, because if they were to be attacked, God's people may rally with the enemy and overtake him. So he decided to enslave God's people. And that wasn't enough. He decided it's not only enough to enslave them, now let's take the firstborn male, no, every Hebrew boy, and let's throw them into the Nile River and let the girls live. And when I think about this statement about their faith, they had to face something that each and every one of us have to face when it comes to our faith, and that the strongest opponent of faith is fear. It's not doubt. The thing that will challenge our faith the most is fear. And fear does two things in my life. It exposes two things in my life. The first thing it exposes is what I value. Because I'm always asking the question, what am I scared to lose? And when I answer that question, it lets me know where my heart really is and if my heart's in the right or wrong places. And the second thing that fear does in my life, what it exposes, is where I trust God the least. Where I trust God the least. And I'm telling you, every single person in this room, when we're faced with fear, we want to take control of our lives back. It's natural to want to have that control instead of facing it with faith. In fact, our fears are only conquered by faith. The only way to diminish your fear is through faith. And when I think of what Moses' parents faced, and I hear the statements that I hear from parents as a family pastor today, and how they're worried about our culture and how kids are growing up, and I hear an adult say to a student or a child, say, you know what, I kind of understand what you're going through because I went through the same things growing up. No, you didn't. There's not one person in this room that went through the things that kids are facing today. And when I read that the average age for the first exposure of pornography is age 9, and I just can list a bunch of more things about our culture that shows it was not even close to what it was like when I was growing up or when you grew up. And Moses' parents had to face their fear with the question of, who am I going to trust with my life? Who is going to build my life? But the second thing they had to answer was, who am I going to build my life with? And I love the part about Moses' parents, if you go back to Exodus, and it said there was a man and a woman who got married from the tribe of Levi. And basically what that's saying is they had a community of people around them that helped them with their faith. And that's exactly what we want to do at Real Life Church, is be a community that helps us with our faith, especially with parents. What keeps me awake at night is, how do I partner more with parents here and resource you to have these great lives of faith throughout the week? And what can we do on the weekend to leverage that for you during the week? And I kind of use this illustration with parents all the time. And I've taken away school hours and sleeping hours, and I say an average parent has 2,912 hours a year to influence their child, to grow their faith. An average child or student spends 40 hours a year at a church. And I believe these two influences are great. But I believe two combined influences are much greater than two individual influences on their own. So I am always dreaming, how can I take these 40 and leverage those into your life to help you be people and families of faith at home? That's why we spend so much time creating engaging environments for your kids and teenagers here. So when they come here, it starts the conversation for you at home. That's why we give you resources to continue the conversation at home about what we teach here, with our Parent Cue handouts in early childhood and elementary, with our Parent Cue app that you can download right now and pick an age, and it gives you things to talk about at dinner or when you're driving, all along throughout the week, so you can help build your faith with your family. That's why we're passionate at Real Life Church about life groups from kindergarten on. And we want another trusted adult in your child's life saying the same things that you are saying at home. We want to come alongside of you to be a community of faith. And when I think about what we can do together, it all comes down to who's going to build our life. And I think it all comes down to a bigger question: can God's heart be trusted? And I love what Jesus says when he says this statement to parents. And he says this: parents, If your children ask for a loaf of bread, do you give them a stone instead? Or if they ask for a fish, do you give them a snake? Of course not. So if you sinful people know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your heavenly Father give good gifts to those who ask him? Translation, we can trust God's heart for our kids and our students. Another translation, you can trust God's heart for you because it's good. Moses' parents were able to face fear, and our fears are only conquered through faith. And if Moses' parents can do that, so can we.
And I need you to soften my heart and break me apart. I need you to open my eyes, see that you're shaping my life. And all I am, and I surrender. Give me faith to trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life.
Well, I just recently got back with my family from a trip to Missouri. We went to visit family, and in classic Brennan Conklin fashion, something happened in the travels that I just hate. You may too, and that is airline being delayed. I don't know, anyone been out there? You're there, you hear the comment, hey, the flight's delayed, and you're like, oh. And I start to think, because this is what waiting looks like for me, is I'm sitting there like we're supposed to land home at 4, now it's going to be 5:30, now I'm going to be 5:30 on the 405, we're going to be stuck forever, we're never going to get back in time the dog, it's going to pee on the floor, and now it's going to be a mess, but it's going to creep into the floor, it's going to ruin it, so we're going to have to replace that. It's probably in the kitchen, undoubtedly, so we got to redo the kitchen. I don't want to redo the kitchen, it's time to buy a new house. Hey Janet, it's time to buy a new house. That's what happens in waiting for me. I don't know about you. Or if you've ever done like the traffic line assessment where there's a red light and you're like, okay, minivan, diesel truck, Dodge Challenger, Dodge Challenger all the way. Light goes green and then minivan mama takes off and you're like, you've got to be kidding me. But like that's just been something in my nature, like since a kid, like even in the toys I would choose. It's like, give me a basketball, football, baseball, like something with instant gratification, not like a chia pet. You know, it's like the worst reward ever in trying to water one of those things. Because I just hate to wait. I don't know if that is with you too, but I know a lot of people have that. And there's this guy, Leon James, he did some study. He's a psychology professor of like what the body is doing in waiting and why is it such a big deal? Because what he noticed is on his way to and from work, he would walk and he would be on the sidewalk and he'd like bump people out of the way, moving people, all of this kind of stuff. And he had sidewalk rage, which apparently is something. And he had it, self-diagnosed, I'm guessing. But he tried to figure out what was going on with him. And what was happening is he found out the internal timer that we have is out of whack. And it's out of whack because of just the pace of our world and our culture. It's like if you want an answer to something and someone doesn't give it to you fast enough, you can Google it and try to find the answer and it's there. It's like you want to get anywhere in the world, you can be there in less than 24 hours. It's like, boom, airplane, I'm there. What we want, we get when we want and how we want it. And that's the way we work. So when we have to wait, oh man, internally, there is turmoil. Like we don't know what to do because we want the reward and we want it now. But the problem is that bleeds into our life. It creates this impatience. And this is what impatience is. I'll have it right up here. Impatience is thinking our plans are more important than everyone else's, even God's. See, impatience is thinking our plans are more important than everyone else's, even God's. And you may have seen that. You may have been on the 405 in traffic and thought, why is this not parting like the Red Sea? Because they have no clue where I need to be. Or maybe you were at the doctor's office and you went up, you put your name on the chart and they highlighted it and you went and sat down and you're waiting and someone else comes in after you, does that, and then they get called back and you're like, oh, that's fun. How did that work? You know, they're there and you're like, okay. But you're a little worried about the timing, and then the next person comes in, they do it, and they go back, and you're like, all right. You know, the worry is more impatience, and it's building up. The third person who had a great lunch, apparently, came in, did that, goes on in, you're like, that's it. And you're like irrational, and I'm going to the counter, and I'm going to let them know about this, because we hate waiting. Well, what does that have to do with Moses, our hero of the faith? Because something happened in his life where he had to wait. And Jim did a great job of where Hebrews 11 talks about the faith of his parents. But what about him? What built into his faith? So we're going to check out Hebrews 11 here. It was by faith that Moses, when he grew up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to share the oppression of God's people instead of enjoying the fleeting pleasure of sin. He thought it was better to suffer for the sake of Christ than to own the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking ahead to his great reward. It was by faith that Moses left the land of Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He kept right on going because he kept his eyes on the one who is invisible. But it didn't start this way for Moses, because Moses, he was brought up by Pharaoh's family, and he was a prince in Egypt. He had all the pleasure, everything he wanted that kingdom could offer at his fingertips. But he began to realize in this that his tribe, the people that he was from, were enslaved and beaten and abused, and he wanted to do something about it. So he executed a plan on his own timing when he saw one of the Israelites being beaten, and he killed the Egyptian guard. You can check this out in Exodus chapter 1 and 2 to see this part of his story. And he does that, but Pharaoh finds out and wants Moses dead, so he flees. So in Moses' life right now, he becomes a fugitive. He goes to a foreign land. He goes and meets this man in his family who is a priest, but also a farmer. Marries one of his daughters and becomes a farmer. And for 40 years, he's out in the desert waiting. Nothing. Just waiting. And then he hears God. And it's in that waiting, it's in that time of not knowing what is next that he grew and his faith became big. Because God knew in this time he was becoming the person that could execute God's plan. Because he had lost something and he had gained something. Because we always do that in the waiting. And Moses, he had lost some relationships. He had lost power, prestige, all of these things. But also inside of him, he lost the greed, impatience that were there and haunting him. And he became the person that God could use in his timing. And what did he gain? Faith, because he let God work, and then he heard him and he fulfilled what God asked him to do. See, it's in the waiting that our faith grows. And some of you know that because you've gone through the waiting. And in there's been loss and pain and suffering, but you waited and you let God mold you into a person that has strong faith, and you live that out. Or some of you right now may be waiting because a child who's grown, but they're wayward and you don't know what to do. Or maybe because the doctor has told you about a condition you have and you're not sure what's next. Or maybe it's a job opportunity and you're going into the unknown and you're in this waiting. But this is a great opportunity for you to be there. Lose some things that may be holding you back from that faith that if you let it, God will grow in you. Because it's always in the waiting that faith grows. And it's just like Moses, because he once was a child of Egypt, but as Hebrews 11 said, he rejected that to be a child of God. He once had all the treasures and the pleasures of Egypt, but again, he rejected that for a future reward. He once lived by his own plan, his own sight, his own path, but he rejected that and he went on God's plan and path, and his faith grew. Because faith always grows in the waiting. And maybe some of you are waiting right now. And what could it be? It just might be God.
And I need you to soften my heart and break me apart. I need you to pierce through the dark and cleanse every part of me. And all I am, I surrender. Give me faith to trust what you say, that you're good, your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life.
Well, so we're talking about taking a risk, talking about having some kind of faith to step out there where you're not really sure what's going to happen next. And I think all of us have something on our mind that we think about, what is that next step for you? Is God really want me to do that? Will God catch me if I fall? Is he going to help me succeed? So I want to know how risk averse you are, because there's a lot of us that, we'll jump off a building. It doesn't matter to us. We're excited. We'll just do it. Yeah, let's do it. And some of us are like, oh, now hold on. Let's think about that a little bit, and you got to work through the details. So I've found that there's one equalizer for us to understand where we all are with risk, and that is how we treat food, and specifically food that falls on the floor. And so I have a picture of the greatest invention of all time, the Oreo cookie. Okay, and this is just the greatest thing of all time. It's beautiful, it's wonderful, and you don't have to get crazy with it. Double stuffed, it's just 2 of these, that's fine. Okay, but don't get into the birthday cake and the lemon and the orange zest and all that. We don't need all that, just Oreo. So with the perfect, beautiful Oreo in mind, how many of you, by show of applause, would eat an Oreo if it fell on the floor? Okay. Even if it was there longer than 5 seconds? Even if that floor was LAX airport? Okay? And what if that floor is the bathroom at LAX? No one? Oh, come on, I'd go there. That's not a problem. It's an Oreo, all right? Cancels out all bad things. All right, so you kind of get a sense of who's risk adverse in here and who's ready to go. And man, there's no better place than watching YouTube to figure out, who are the crazy people amongst us. And we found these videos. Take a look at this. Wow. I hope you didn't mind. Those are just some of my home movies. You know, something we shot last weekend while I was out with the kids. So anyway, I don't like to talk about it, but that's what it is. Seriously though, I mean, what makes people do that? I mean, that's just crazy. You know, when you see people that are really over the top risky, you have to ask yourself, why were they able to do that? Now, for some, it could just be chemistry. It's just the way they're wired up. For some, it's their age. The younger you are, the more immortal you think you are, you know. It could be the fact that, you know, it's just a dare that you were given, or maybe it's your desperation, you know, this is better than the other thing. Whatever it is, there's different reasons why people do that. Now, for most of us, some really common ways that we think about taking a risk come down to four things that we cycle through in our minds. The first one is, have I done this before? In other words, it's easier to jump out of a plane if I've already done this before. I've taken the class, I've done the tandem jump, now I can do this one on my own. Here's the second one, and that is you've seen others succeed at it. This is the whole dad telling his kids, watch daddy do it, and then you do it, all right? And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but when you see somebody else do it, you're a little bit more likely to risk it. Here's the third one, the pros and cons. You weigh, is it going to be better to go or better to stay? Better to jump, better to not jump. You know, you think these things through, and that weighs into your decision. Or finally, you trust a leader. You may not trust the decision, but you trust the one who's making it, or you trust the one who is going before you, and so you'll go with them. Now, the clearest way to see this is, you know, Magic Mountain, when a father's trying to get his kid onto a ride. I've been that dad. Okay? Our youngest daughter, Sydney, was a little bit nervous about getting on roller coasters, but we have a rule in our family, and that is everybody rides. Okay? We're not going to stand out and wait while everybody else goes, and we rotate the kid and all that. Nope, we're all going. And so we got to Superman one time, and I said, you're riding Superman? She says, no, I don't want to ride Superman. I said, you're riding Superman. Come on. And I drag her over there, you know. It's not a biblical concept, but, you know, it's you know, fear the Father. So we get over there, and I put her on the ride, and she, I don't want to ride. You know, and the people are coming around like, should we call somebody? You know, is this right? You know? But I said, you're going to love it. You're going to love it. You're going to love it. She finally calmed down because she was trusting me. And then we rode the ride. She loved it. And then she wanted to ride it again and again. And now I'm the one going, I don't want to ride anymore, you know. Because it's just, you know, it's just overwhelming. Right. So for many of us, it comes down to, you know, one of these four things. Now, it is the same thing with faith. For those of you that are brand new to faith, or you're just kind of learning and you're not even sure if you believe in Jesus or God, or somebody just bribed you to get you here, or whatever it is, you have these same four criteria when it comes to belief or faith. For those of you that are followers of Jesus, but you're ready to take that next step and you know there's something else you've got to do or something God is calling you to do, and you're just not sure if you're going to do that, you run through these four things as well. I mean, let's look at these questions again. You know, for those of you, you're thinking, have I done this before? And some of you are thinking, I haven't ever done this before. It's my first time in church. I don't understand what to do. You seen others succeed? No, not really. Some people's lives seem to get worse when they become a follower of Jesus. I'm not sure if I want to do this. Pros and cons? I don't know. I kind of like my life the way it is now. It seems like I'd be, you know, trading down if I do this. Trust a leader? I'm not real sure if I can trust any of these people, right? And so inevitably, what some of us do is we back away from faith and we say, okay, I'm just not going to be part of a church, or I'm not going to be part of faith, but I am spiritual. I do believe in a higher power. And I'll listen to some podcasts, and I'll meditate a little bit, and I'll read some certain books and kind of create my own version of faith, because we're not sure if we can trust this version. You see, the reality of faith is sometimes faith is taking a step into the unknown. And that's exactly what we see in the story of Moses. We've seen it from his parents, we've seen it from him, and now we're going to see it from the people who follow him. Think about the risk they had to take. Take a look at what the text tells us. It was by faith that Moses commanded the people of Israel to keep the Passover and to sprinkle blood on the doorpost so the angel of death would not kill their firstborn sons. So what this is talking about is Moses comes in, he says, let my people go. Pharaoh says no. And so one after another, these plagues come about that are just crazy plagues. And Pharaoh goes, okay, you can go. And then he changes his mind. And finally, God's had enough, and he says, I'm going to send the angel of death through the camp, and the firstborn of every household is going to die. And so Moses goes out to his people and he says, you've got to sprinkle blood on the doorpost of your home in order to protect your firstborn. And they're thinking, really? This is crazy. I mean, have we done this before? No. Have we seen others do it? Absolutely not. Pros and cons? Yeah, I guess there's some there if it's true. But do we trust the leader? Perhaps. I mean, sprinkling blood on the doorpost of your home, that just seems weird. I mean, is this in the HOA guidelines? Can we even do this, right? But think about the risk they took to do it. Well, it works out. And Pharaoh says, you all can leave. And now they're marching out, and take a look at what happens then. It was by faith that the people of Israel went right through the Red Sea as though they were on dry ground. But when the Egyptians tried to follow, they were all drowned. Now think about this. They finally get out of slavery. This is great. They march across the desert. They come up against this body of water. They think this is a perfect place to camp. They settle in, and here comes Pharaoh and all of his chariots because they've changed their mind. They're bringing back their slave force. And suddenly everybody's scared to death. Moses stands up, prays, spreads out his arms, the waters part. And there's a clear path for them all to walk through to get to the other side. Now think about how scary that would be. Huge walls of water on each side of you. This is not like walking through the aquarium, okay, where there's a glass in between you. I mean, there's a wall of water. And you got to be thinking, if I get down in there, what if this just falls apart? It's over for us. Why in the world would they step out into the unknown? Is it because they've done this before? No. Is it because they've seen others succeed? Absolutely not. Pros and cons? Well, let's see. Getting drowned or going back into slavery? I'm not so sure. Is it trust a leader? For some. For some, they trusted in Moses because they'd seen these cool things he'd done. For some, they trusted in Moses as God because they believed that God was behind it all. But not all of them. What is it that gives these people the faith to step out into the unknown? Well, that's what we've been driving at all day here. What is that thing that will help you take that risk to do the thing that you're scared the most to do? And the answer is, some people call it the wisdom of crowds. Some people call it the power of others. But it really comes down to good old-fashioned peer pressure. When 1 million people cross the Red Sea, you tend to go with them. And that's what happened there. In fact, Harvard recently did a study on what makes people happy. And they discovered that if you were to get a raise, you would have like a 2% bump in your happiness scale, okay, just for a little bit. But if somebody that you know and care for, they get a raise or something good happens to them, you have a 15% bump in happiness because you're happy for them. And then, this is what's just fascinating. Then that person you're a friend with, if they have a friend that you don't even know, but something good happens to them, then it makes your friend happy and it makes you happy to a tune of 10% bump in your happiness. That is not just secondhand happiness, that is third-hand happiness. Now, why is that? Because sometimes the quality of your life comes down to the crowd you're around. Now, that can be really negative. We've seen that happen with peer pressure in high school, college. We've seen that happen with terrorist cells. We've seen that happen with gangs. But sometimes it can be really positive. We see that with the story of Alcoholics Anonymous. We see that with Celebrate Recovery. We see that with church. We see that with rooted groups that get together and begin to share their faith stories. We see when you surround yourself with the right people, it actually has an impact on your individual faith. Back in April, we were all saddened to hear the news about this terrorist attack that happened in Egypt, where an individual had gone to a school for Coptic Christian children. And Coptic is just another way to say Egyptian Christians. And they went there to detonate a bomb inside the school. But as this terrorist approached, there was a security guard there named Nashir Farim. And he saw this individual approaching and thought, something is not right. And so he walked over to him and said, sir, can I take you over this way? And begins to lead him away from the school. This individual figures out what's going on and detonates the bomb. And Nashir Farim was killed. A few weeks later, a talk show in Egypt, the largest talk show in the area, decides to do a story on the widow of this security guard. And so this talk show host that was incredibly famous and everybody watches and listens to this guy sends out a reporter to the widow's house. And the reporter asks her this question: if you could say anything to that terrorist, what would you say? And she said, "We forgive you." Not just me, not just my family, but all of us who are Christians, Coptic Christians, we forgive you. The interviewer doesn't know what to say, throws it back to the studio host, who is paid to talk for a living. And for 12 seconds, he's speechless, dead air. And finally, he looks at the camera in just disbelief. And he says, the cops, or the Coptic Christians, are made of steel. Where does that faith come from? It comes from the people you're around. Because there's times your faith is low and their faith is high, and they pull you through. Here's the bottom line of what we've been saying all day. The depth of your faith is equal to the quality of your crowd. The depth of your faith is not just based upon what you've read, what you've studied, what you've learned. The depth of your faith is equal to the quality of your crowd. So here's my question for you. How quality is your crowd? The people you're friends with, the people that influence you, the people that are speak into your life, people you work with, the people you're around all the time. Some of it you can't help, but what's the quality of your crowd? This is why we talk about joining a Rooted group all the time. We just finished up our 3rd round of Rooted just this past Friday night, an incredible celebration. People got baptized. It was awesome. We're going to do this again in August. And I know summer's crazy. I know you're traveling. I know you got a lot going on. But I want you to just kind of mentally make a note. In August, we're going to be in a Rooted group because you need that kind of quality of your crowd. The depth of your faith is equal to the quality of your crowd. I know that's true for so many around here, but I know that was specifically true for a couple from real life that we helped support as they became missionaries in the Czech Republic. Take a look at their story.
I'm Corey,
I'm Anissa.
and we are missionaries in the Czech Republic. We're a part of an organization called Josiah Venture, and we work with a tour called Exit Tour. Our band Divine Attraction's been around since I think 2008. Exit Tour is a preventative program that goes into high schools. Our team is full of missionaries and pastors and youth leaders, and we go and talk about drugs and sex and AIDS and different preventative topics, but really everybody's there to kind of point people to Jesus, to share our stories. We're working with local churches in whatever city we're in, and then we get to invite them to some of our own parties and afternoon activities, and then when they're now on our territory, we can really open up and share about God, what He's done in our lives. And then at the end of the week, we do a big outreach concert for the city. The coolest part for me is when they pray in their own language and they're just repeating after the translator in Czech, and they just pray and ask Jesus into their heart, like in a club, wherever we are, and to me that's like the coolest thing we get to see out there.
We were so excited to go to Czech. That was kind of the easy decision, and then actually like staying faithful was really hard because the reality sets in and you realize like you're leaving family and there's a lot of money involved. The step of faith is scary, but staying faithful was much harder for us. We didn't plan on having a baby out there, and then we did. So not having a family support for the baby was super hard, but I think we just knew we would have to let go and lay down those things, and God would provide for us. We knew if God was telling us to let go of something, He was going to give us an even better replacement.
And I think like through all of that, there's a strange peace that you have, like the Bible says, like a peace that surpasses all understanding. And I think it's that peace that we can't really explain. That's just like the foundation, and we just can always come back to, we know God's called us there, and so we just rest in that. It took us about, how long was it? About 2 years, or almost
2 years.
Yeah, over 2 years in preparation to move out there. So I think that's part of, what God wants to bring us through. Can He really trust us to be faithful with what He called us to do?
We learned in that waiting period how to have big faith, and I think it was cool for us to see like the initial step built our faith, and then we kind of just kept growing and growing and growing on top of that.
Yeah, I think amazing things happen when God can get you to a point where you can just say, I don't know how this is going to happen, but I know that God's going to do it. You do see incredible things happen. My big thing all the time is He's called me here, so like I'm equipped and I'm ready to do this, even if I don't feel like it.
It was really just trusting God that you're going to take care of me, and you're the sole person that I'm going to need to rely on, but that's enough. You know, that's plenty. That's more than enough.
God's given all of us something that we're passionate about, something that we're good at, something that's in us. He really is good at like the things that you're passionate about, using those things to serve Him. Think outside the box of what it looks like to go on mission for God. Maybe that's in a way that no one else has done before, and I think God is looking for people to be creative in sharing His gospel. So
when you feel opposition, but after you step out in faith, a lot of times you can think that is not from God, and maybe you didn't hear Him right, but usually that's exactly where God wants you, and once you just push beyond, it's even better than you imagined. But you have to stay. You have to. The cool thing is God will lead you. Even if you step out a little bit, we've found so many times we're not sure this is exactly what God wants for us, but at least we're going. And if we're going, He can guide us. But if we're staying still, you know, we're stagnant. We're not doing anything. He can't guide us anywhere.